There is a moment, if you are honest enough to face it, when the illusion breaks. You wake up early. You check your phone. No message that changes your future. No opportunity waiting. No mentor offering guidance. No investor believing in your vision. Just silence. You look around at the people in your life. They are busy, comfortable, focused on their own survival, their own goals, their own problems. And then it hits you. No one is coming. No one is coming to discover your talent. No one is coming to fund your ambition. No one is coming to push you when your discipline collapses at 5 a.m. No one is coming to rescue you from mediocrity. And if you fail, the world will not pause. It will continue without you. For most people, this realization feels like abandonment. It feels unfair. They start building quiet arguments in their mind. I didn't have support. I didn't have connections. I didn't have guidance. But history has never been written by the supported. It has been written by individuals who learned how to operate without emotional cushioning. And very few minds understood this brutal truth better than Niccolò Machiavelli. Machiavelli did not write for the comfortable. He wrote for the isolated. For the ruler who understood that dependence is elegant weakness. A prince who relies entirely on others does not control his destiny. He negotiates with it. And the same applies to you. The moment your discipline depends on encouragement, it becomes fragile. The moment your ambition depends on support, it becomes conditional. The moment your consistency depends on recognition, it becomes unstable. This is the truth most motivational slogans avoid. They tell you to believe. They tell you to visualize. They tell you the right people will come. But what if they don't? What if silence is the default? When Machiavelli was removed from political office in Florence, he did not just lose his position. He lost proximity to power, and proximity creates identity. When you are inside the system, you feel relevant. When you are outside, you feel invisible. He was imprisoned, tortured, exiled. No public defense, no rescue, no powerful ally stepping in, just distance. And distance does something dangerous. It removes noise. When you are surrounded by people, you can blame circumstances. When you are surrounded by structure, you can blame the system. When you are surrounded by encouragement, you can borrow confidence. But when you are alone, patterns become visible. You see where your discipline collapses without supervision. You see how often you delay action without accountability. You see how much of your ambition was fueled by being seen. Isolation removes the audience, and without an audience, performance has no reward. So the question becomes uncomfortable. Were you building or were you performing? It is easy to sound ambitious when someone asks about your goals. It is easy to feel productive when someone praises your effort. It is easy to appear disciplined when someone is watching. But when no one asks, when no one notices, when no one cares, that is where identity is exposed. Most people shrink here. They reduce their goals to match their comfort. They return to environments that feel safe. They choose belonging over growth, because growth without applause feels heavy. But here is the hidden advantage of this moment. When no one is coming, there is no interference, no expectations, no opinions, no pressure to impress. You are free, but most people don't know how to handle freedom without validation. Silence feels like neglect, but silence can be preparation. When Machiavelli entered exile, he did not collapse into self-pity. He observed, he studied, he wrote. He sharpened his understanding of power from a distance. Removed from influence, he saw influence more clearly. The same can happen to you. When you are not chasing recognition, your standards change. When you are not competing for attention, your thinking deepens. When you are not distracted by applause, your execution sharpens. But only if you stop interpreting isolation as rejection. Isolation is not proof you are incapable. It is proof that the world owes you nothing, and that is powerful. Because once you truly accept that no one is coming, you stop waiting. You stop scanning for support. You stop explaining your potential. You stop building excuses around absence. You begin asking a different question. If no one helps me, can I still move? That question is dangerous, because once the answer becomes yes, you are no longer dependent. You are no longer fragile. You are no longer negotiating with circumstances. You are operating. There is a psychological shift that happens here. At first, the silence feels heavy. Then it feels neutral. Eventually, it feels empowering. Because you realize something most people never do, if success comes, it will be because you built it. If opportunity appears, it will be because you created leverage. If recognition arrives, it will be a byproduct, not a requirement. And suddenly, the absence of support stops feeling like injustice. It starts feeling like clean ground. No noise, no interference, no interference, no illusion. Just you and the work. So stop waiting, stop looking around, stop expecting someone to validate your ambition. No one is coming. Good, now you can begin. There is something more dangerous than having no support, needing it. When you first realize no one is coming, it feels external, like the world failed to show up for you. But after the shock fades, a deeper problem surfaces. You still want to be seen. You still want someone to notice the effort, to acknowledge the grind, to recognize the sacrifice. And that desire, if you don't control it, will quietly sabotage you. Validation is subtle. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It tells you to post the progress, to hint at the plan, to announce the late nights, to share the vision before it's built, not because it helps, but because it feels good. Approval releases reward chemicals in your brain. Agreement reduces doubt. Attention confirms identity. And when you have no support, the craving becomes stronger. You tell yourself you're building a network. You tell yourself you're documenting the journey. But often, you are leaking energy. Every time you speak about a goal too early, your brain registers partial completion. You feel progress without producing results. That is dangerous, because ambition requires stored pressure. Look at Niccolò Machiavelli during exile. He had no audience, no public platform, no influence. He did not spend his isolation trying to prove he still mattered. He studied power quietly. He analyzed rulers from a distance. He wrote with precision. When the prince was completed, it wasn't noise. It was concentrated strategy. There is a difference between seeking reaction and building leverage. Validation seeks reaction. Strategy builds leverage. If you need people to believe in you before you act, you are outsourcing confidence, and outsourced confidence collapses under pressure. The same crowd that praises you today can doubt you tomorrow. The same audience that applauds your success can disappear at failure. Crowds are unstable. Internal standards are not. This is why killing the need for validation is essential. When no one is watching, your effort becomes pure. You stop asking, does this look impressive? You start asking, does this produce results? You stop asking, will they like this? You start asking, does this move me forward? That shift is ruthless, because it forces you to detach identity from perception. Most people can't do that. They are addicted to being seen as ambitious more than being effective. They want to appear disciplined more than actually be disciplined. They want to talk about execution more than endure it. But when you truly accept that no one is coming, something liberating happens. You realize something else. No one is judging you either. That fear, what will they think, begins to dissolve, because they're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. This is freedom. You can experiment privately, fail privately, adjust privately. There is no social penalty for mistakes, no reputation to protect. This is asymmetric advantage. While others are performing success online, you are engineering it offline. While others are announcing goals, you are executing silently. While others chase encouragement, you are building competence. Competence does not need validation. Competence speaks through results, and results silence doubt. But here is the real transformation. When you kill the need for validation, your emotional volatility drops. Silence doesn't discourage you. Criticism doesn't destabilize you. Lack of praise doesn't slow you down. You become internally regulated, calm, precise, hard to influence. And people who are hard to influence are hard to control. That is strategic independence. Because once your identity is no longer tied to approval, you stop making decisions to please. You stop adjusting your pace for comfort. You stop explaining your ambition to make others comfortable. You just move. Quietly. Relentlessly. And over time, something ironic happens. The same people who ignored you begin to notice. The same people who doubted you begin to ask questions. The same people who offered no support begin to show interest. But by then, you no longer require it. Validation becomes optional. And when something becomes optional, it loses power over you. This phase is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming self-sufficient. Because once you no longer need recognition to operate, you can focus entirely on leverage. And leverage compounds. Validation fades, approval fluctuates. Attention shifts. Leverage scales. If you are serious about succeeding without support, this is non-negotiable. You must train yourself to operate in silence, to build without applause, to improve without announcement, to execute without explanation. Because the moment your work depends on being seen, it becomes performance. And performance collapses when the audience leaves. So stop announcing, stop hinting, stop fishing for belief. Let your results speak when they are ready. Until then, build in quiet. Because when you no longer need validation to move, you become dangerous in a way most people never will. And that danger is calm, controlled, unshakable. Once you stop waiting for support, and once you kill the need for validation, a new problem appears: freedom. No one is checking on you. No one is setting deadlines. No one is measuring your output. And freedom without structure creates drift. This is where most self-reliant people fail. They survive isolation. They detach from approval. They promise themselves they'll build something serious. But they never replace external pressure with internal systems. So their productivity becomes emotional. Disciplined 1 week. Distracted the next. Focused when inspired, absent when inspired, absent when bored. That is not power. That is mood-based ambition. And mood collapses under pressure. Look at Niccolò Machiavelli during exile. He did not have authority. He did not have influence. He did not have status, but he had rhythm. Historical accounts describe how he structured his days deliberately. He handled manual tasks during the day. In the evening, he read classical texts. At night, he wrote and analyzed political systems. He created order when his external world had none. That distinction matters. Power is not built from motivation. It is built from repetition. When you have no support, discipline becomes your infrastructure. You need systems that function regardless of mood. Wake time, work block, skill development, reflection, execution. Not dramatic, not glamorous, consistent. Structure eliminates negotiation. Without structure, every day becomes an internal debate. Should I work now? Am I focused enough? Maybe later. That constant negotiation drains energy. Systems remove the conversation. You don't decide whether to execute. You execute because it is scheduled. That is the shift from ambition to engineering. Most people romanticize grinding alone, but grinding without direction is chaos. You don't need intensity. You need architecture. Architecture of skill. Architecture of output. Architecture of improvement. Ask yourself something direct. What are you building every single day? Not thinking about. Not planning. Building. Because in isolation, your biggest advantage is uninterrupted focus. No meetings, no social pressure, no constant interruptions. That silence can create drift, or it can create depth. Depth requires deliberate practice. Choose one core skill that moves your ambition forward. Study it, train it, refine it. Track measurable progress. Do not rely on feelings. Rely on numbers. If you write, measure words produced. If you train, measure strength increased. If you build, measure output completed. If you sell, measure conversion improved. Because tangible improvement compounds, and compounding is invisible at first. That's why most people quit. The first month feels slow. The second month feels repetitive. The third month feels boring. But around the fourth, fifth, sixth month, something shifts. Skill sharpens. Confidence stabilizes. Execution speeds up. That is the power of quiet structure. Here is something critical. Structure protects you from emotion. There will be days when doubt returns, days when isolation feels heavy, days when comparison tries to creep back in. Structure absorbs those fluctuations. You don't stop because you feel uncertain. You follow the system. Over time, identity changes. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying. You start seeing yourself as someone who operates. That identity is different. It is not based on potential. It is based on behavior. And behavior, when repeated long enough, becomes reputation, even if no one sees it yet. Isolation gave you detachment. Killing validation gave you clarity. Structure gives you momentum. Now you are no longer surviving alone. You are advancing alone. And advancement creates something powerful. Private proof. Not public praise. Private proof. You see the skill improving. You see the output increasing. You see the discipline stabilizing. That builds internal confidence that does not require applause. And once you have private proof, the external world becomes less intimidating. Because when opportunity appears, you are not hoping you are ready. You know you are. But let's be clear. Time alone does not guarantee growth. Directed time does. You can spend months isolated and still be stagnant. If your days are random, if your focus shifts constantly, if you consume more than you produce, consumption is not construction. Watching videos is not building. Reading books is not building. Talking about plans is not building. Building is producing something measurable, every day, without negotiation, without announcement, without drama. This is where most people secretly collapse. Because structure feels boring, it feels repetitive, it feels invisible, but invisible repetition is what builds visible dominance. If you truly want to succeed without support, this is non-negotiable. Create systems. Follow them regardless of emotion. Track output. Increase precision. Let repetition sharpen you. Because when you operate through structure instead of mood, you become predictable to yourself. And when you become predictable to yourself, you become reliable. And reliability is power. Not loud power, not dramatic power, controlled power. The kind that compounds quietly until it cannot be ignored. At some point, after you've built in silence, after you've created structure, after you've sharpened your skill in isolation, you step forward. You send the proposal. You pitch the idea. You apply for the position. You release the work. And the response comes back. Nothing. Or worse. No. No reply. No interest. No recognition. And here is where most people break. Because rejection feels personal. It feels like the world evaluated you and delivered a verdict. Not good enough. Not ready. Not impressive. When you have no support system cushioning you, rejection hits harder. There's no one saying it's their loss. No one reminding you that you're talented. No one reframing it for you. Just silence. And your thoughts. But powerful individuals interpret rejection differently. They don't interpret it through identity. They interpret it through strategy. Look at Niccolò Machiavelli. After exile, he attempted to regain political favor. He wrote letters. He positioned himself carefully. He tried to re-enter the political arena. He was not immediately welcomed back. Doors did not open instantly. But he didn't collapse emotionally. He observed. He studied the political climate. He analyzed who held influence. He assessed what the system valued now, not what it valued before. That distinction is everything. Most people respond to rejection with ego. They don't believe in me. They don't see my potential. They're biased. But ego blocks data. Rejection is rarely a final verdict. It is information. If 10 doors close, that is not a curse. It is a pattern, and patterns contain data. Maybe your skill isn't sharp enough yet. Maybe your communication lacks precision. Maybe your value isn't visible. Maybe your leverage is weak. That is not an insult. It is clarity. And clarity is powerful because it makes the problem solvable. Instead of saying, "No one supports me," ask a harder question. Why would they? Why would someone invest in you? Why would someone partner with you? Why would someone partner with you? Emotionally, you want support for potential. Strategically, the world supports proof. That is a brutal shift. But it is freeing, because proof can be built. Rejection exposes friction. Your job is not to defend your ego. Your job is to remove friction. If they ignore your pitch, refine it. If they doubt your skill, sharpen it. If they overlook your value, amplify it. Every rejection reveals a variable. Find it, adjust it, try again. This requires emotional control, because rejection will try to pull you into self-doubt. It will whisper, "Maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you should lower your ambition." That voice is not truth. It is discomfort reacting to resistance. Powerful people expect rejection. They anticipate it. They design around it. Rejection becomes calibration. It tightens strategy. It refines execution. It exposes blind spots. Without support, you are forced to process rejection internally. That is uncomfortable, but it builds emotional resilience, because once you stop fearing rejection, your range expands. Most people play small to avoid being told no. They reduce ambition to protect their ego. But if no already does not destabilize you, you attempt bigger moves, bolder proposals, higher stakes, stronger positioning. The worst outcome becomes information, not humiliation. That changes your behavior. And behavior determines trajectory. Rejection also reveals something deeper. It reveals whether your ambition is real. If one no stops you, you are attached to validation. If 10 no's stop you, you are attached to ease. But if rejection sharpens you instead of shrinking you, you are operating differently. There is another layer here. Do not confuse persistence with stubbornness. If rejection repeats consistently, adjust. Do not keep repeating the same strategy expecting a different result. That is ego disguised as confidence. Adaptation is power. In The Prince, one underlying principle is clear: adapt to reality or lose. The world does not reward intention, it rewards leverage. If you are being ignored, you lack leverage. If you are being dismissed, you lack leverage. That is not emotional, it is structural. So build leverage, increase competence, increase visibility of value, increase precision. Let rejection refine you instead of define you. Here is the deeper transformation. When rejection becomes data, it stops being dramatic. You no longer spiral when someone says no. You analyze, you adjust, you execute again. That calm response separates professionals from amateurs. Amateurs take rejection personally. Professionals take notes. Isolation taught you to stand alone. Structure taught you to build consistently. Now rejection teaches you to adapt. And adaptation is survival at a higher level. Because eventually, you will not just be building alone. You will be competing. And competition intensifies rejection. If you cannot process small resistance now, large resistance will break you later. So treat rejection as training, not as insult, not as evidence of unworthiness. As calibration, the world is not against you. It is neutral, and neutrality can be studied. When you master this, something shifts permanently. You stop chasing approval. You stop fearing no. You stop interpreting silence as failure. You move, you test, you refine, again and again, until the data changes. And when the data changes, results follow. Not because someone supported you, but because you adjusted until you became difficult to ignore. If you endure long enough, if you build with structure, if you refine through rejection, eventually something changes. Your skill sharpens, your results improve, your name begins to circulate, opportunities appear where silence used to be. And this is the most dangerous phase so far, because struggle is predictable. Success is not. When you had nothing, your focus was pure. You were disciplined because you had to be. You were silent because no one cared. You were precise because you had no margin for error. But now people are watching. Now offers come in. Now ruffers come in. Now attention returns. Now recognition appears. And attention changes behavior. The same isolation that built you can be undone by recognition, if you are not careful. Look at Niccolò Machiavelli. His writing was not just about gaining power, it was about maintaining it, because acquiring influence is one battle, managing it is another. In The Prince, one principle is clear: new rulers are unstable. Why? Because success shifts psychology. When you rise quickly, ego expands. When praise increases, self-assessment weakens. When doors open easily, caution decreases. This is where many self-made individuals collapse. They confuse momentum with permanence. They believe early wins mean structural dominance. But early success is fragile. It must be protected. Here is the first rule of handling new success. Do not change your standards because your position changed. The discipline that built you must remain. The structure that stabilized you must stay. The silence that sharpened you must still exist. Recognition should not alter routine. If your work ethic drops when success appears, you were never disciplined. You were desperate. Desperation builds. Ego destroys. Second rule: do not expand faster than your competence. When opportunities multiply, it is tempting to say yes to everything. More exposure, more partnerships, more visibility. But expansion without depth creates cracks. Power amplifies weaknesses. If your systems are not strong, growth exposes instability. Control your pace. Controlled growth lasts longer than explosive visibility. Third rule: detach from admiration. When people who once ignored you begin praising you, it feels validating. But admiration is as unstable as rejection. The same crowd that elevates you can turn when perception shifts. If your identity becomes tied to praise, you become reactive again. You worked too hard to gain emotional independence. Do not surrender it now. Power must be handled with neutrality. Calm when rising. Calm when criticized. Calm when envied. Calm when doubted. Because volatility at this stage attracts enemies. When you had nothing, no one saw you as competition. When you begin gaining ground, dynamics change. People compare, people calculate, people position. This is natural. Do not become paranoid. Become precise. Maintain your competence. Strengthen your leverage. Keep building depth behind visibility. The goal is not to look powerful. The goal is to be structurally unshakable. There is another subtle shift here. Earlier, you felt the absence of support. Now, you may experience the abundance of shallow support. And shallow support is more dangerous than none at all, because it distracts. People will align with your momentum, not your struggle. They will appear when things are moving. But not all alignment is strategic. Some want proximity, some want aximity, some want association, some want access. You must remain selective. Isolation built your foundation. Discipline built your momentum. Rejection built your precision. Success will test your restraint. Most people are stable in struggle. Few are stable in struggle. Few are stable in success. When you are struggling, humility is easy. When you are rising, humility requires intention. Do not forget what built you. Do not relax the standards that created progress. Do not allow praise to soften discipline. Because the world does not just test your ability to endure nothing. It tests your ability to handle something. And something is heavier than nothing. Success brings pressure. Expectations increase. Visibility magnifies mistakes. Small errors become public. Minor weaknesses become amplified. This is where emotional control becomes critical again. Do not let excitement distort judgment. Do not let opportunity rush decisions. Pause, assess, move deliberately. Success is not the time to become loud. It is the time to become sharper. When momentum builds, double your standards. When recognition grows, tighten your structure. When praise increases, audit your competence. That is how you stabilize growth. Because here is the truth. You did not build alone to become dependent again, not dependent on applause, not dependent on admiration, not dependent on admiration, not dependent on public approval. If you require constant recognition to stay motivated, you are fragile. If you can maintain discipline regardless of attention, you are stable, and stability is rare. The world is full of people who can rise. Very few can sustain. Sustaining requires emotional neutrality. It requires remembering that success is not proof of superiority. It is proof that your strategy worked for now, and strategies must continue evolving. So stay measured, stay disciplined, stay calm. Because the moment you believe you've arrived is the moment you stop building. And if you stop building, you slowly return to dependence. You did not survive isolation to collapse under recognition. You built power. Now protect it, quietly. There is a phase that comes after isolation, after discipline, after rejection, after early success stabilizes. It is subtle, and if you are not careful, it can undo everything. This is the phase where you no longer need anyone, and that is exactly when you must decide who enters your circle. At the beginning, having no one felt painful. Then it became powerful. You learned to operate alone. You learned to build without applause. You learned to adjust without reassurance. Now support begins to appear. Partnership offers, collaborations, investors, allies, and here is the danger. If you still carry the memory of loneliness as a wound, you will overcorrect. You will attach too quickly, not because the alliance is strategic, but because you do not want to feel alone again. That is dependency returning in a different form. Look at Niccolò Machiavelli. One of his clearest warnings in The Prince concerns alliances formed from weakness. A ruler who depends entirely on the arms, protection, or influence of others loses autonomy. The same applies to you. If you partner because you are afraid to stand alone again, you surrender leverage. But if you partner from strength, you negotiate differently. You are not looking to be saved. You are looking to expand. That difference changes everything. When you choose alliances from need, you tolerate misalignment. You ignore red flags. You compromise standards. You silence intuition. Because somewhere inside, you are still afraid of isolation. But isolation no longer scares you. You survived it. You sharpened in it. You built in it. Which means your criteria must now be ruthless. Ask direct questions. Does this alliance multiply my leverage or dilute it? Does this person respect my structure or disrupt it? Does this partnership accelerate growth or create emotional noise? The strongest position in negotiation is indifference, not arrogance, not coldness, indifference born from capability. If this works, good. If it doesn't, you continue alone. That mindset forces respect because people sense when you do not need them, and paradoxically, that is when they value you more. Earlier, you wanted belief. Now, you require alignment. Belief is emotional. Alignment is structural. Belief says, I support you. Alignment says, our strengths compound. Belief disappears under pressure. Alignment survives it. There is another shift here. You stop chasing proximity to power. In the beginning, you may have wanted access to networks, access to influence, access to rooms you were not invited into. But once you build yourself, something changes. Access without leverage makes you subordinate. Leverage creates equal footing. Now, when you enter a room, you are not hoping to be accepted. You are assessing whether the room deserves your time. That is evolution. Isolation built independence. Discipline built competence. Now discernment protects both. Not every opportunity is strategic. Not every connection is beneficial. Not every expansion is necessary. When you had nothing, you wanted any movement. Now, you must protect momentum, because your time is capital. Your focus is a weapon. Your structure is an edge, and the wrong alliance can fracture all three. There's another danger here: flattery. When you rise, admiration increases. People will tell you what you want to hear. They will praise your growth. They will compliment your vision. If you are not grounded, you will mistake admiration for value. But admiration is cheap. Leverage is earned. Choose partnerships based on measurable contribution. Shared standards. Mutual competence. Not shared excitement. Not shared excitement. Not shared excitement. Not shared hype. Shared execution. And here is something important. Do not become isolated again out of ego. Independence does not mean rejecting everyone. It means selecting intentionally. Strategic independence allows collaboration without dependence. You must remain capable of standing alone, even while working with others. That is power. If the partnership ends, you continue. If the investor leaves, you adjust. If the collaborator disappears, you move forward. No collapse, no panic, no desperation, because your foundation was built without them. This is the difference between someone who needed support and someone who chose it. Choosing is powerful. Needing is fragile. Remember this. The goal was never to prove you could do everything alone forever. The goal was to ensure that if everyone disappeared again, you would still stand. That confidence changes your posture. You no longer chase belonging. You no longer fear misalignment. You no longer tolerate dilution. You move from scarcity to selection, and selection changes trajectory. You choose slower. You evaluate deeper. You commit carefully. Because you understand something most people do not. The wrong alliance costs more than solitude ever did. Solitude sharpened you. Misalignment weakens you. So choose carefully. Choose from strength. Choose from stability. Choose from clarity. Because once you no longer need anyone, you are finally qualified to decide who deserves access. And that decision will define your next level more than any skill ever could. Let's end this without inspiration. No dramatic music. No believe in yourself speech. No emotional comfort. Just reality. Nobody cares about your struggle. They care about outcomes. You can explain how hard it's been. You can describe how unfair the circumstances were. You can talk about how no one supported you. It changes nothing. The world does not reward effort. It rewards value. That is the final shift you must make if you truly succeeded without support. When you had no one backing you, something brutal happened. You were forced to confront yourself. Not your intentions, not your potential, not your passion, your competence. Are you actually good? Not motivated, not ambitious, not working on it. Good, precise, useful, reliable. Because when there is no applause, skill becomes the only currency. That is the hidden advantage of isolation. It strips away illusion. It exposes delusion. It exposes delusion. It forces you to measure yourself against reality instead of compliments. Look at Niccolò Machiavelli. He did not write about what sounded noble. He wrote about what worked. Power was not maintained through good intentions. It was maintained through positioning and results. The same applies to your life. You do not rise because you deserve to. You rise because you become difficult to ignore. That is it. Zero support teaches you something dangerous. Excuses do not scale. If you fail and no one is there to soften it, you either fix the weakness or repeat the failure. There is no emotional cushion. And that environment, while uncomfortable, produces sharp operators. Here is what changes permanently. You stop announcing early. You execute longer. You stop explaining your vision. You build proof. Because proof silences everything. When there was no one tapping, you learned to clap for yourself differently. Not with affirmation, with metrics, numbers, output, skill growth, revenue, strength, performance, data. Feelings fluctuate, data clarifies. Most people stay stuck because they want comfort while they build. You built without it, which means you learn discipline the hard way, and discipline compounds. Motivation fades, support fluctuates, trends shift, discipline scales. That is where separation happens. You no longer chase recognition. You chase improvement. You do not ask, why don't they see it? You ask, how do I increase my edge? That question changes everything because it moves you from emotion to leverage. You become less reactive, more calculated. When something fails, you adjust. When someone doubts you, you improve. When opportunity disappears, you create alternatives. That mindset only forms when you have operated alone long enough. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people secretly want to be saved by a mentor, by an investor, by a partner, by luck. But if you truly build without support, you understand something deeper. Even if help arrives, you still have to carry yourself. No one can substitute competence. No one can replace execution. No one can inject discipline into you. Either you built it or you didn't. That is the final filter. You do not need hype. You do not need validation. You do not need reassurance. You need leverage. Leverage in skill. Leverage in positioning. Leverage in decision-making. And leverage comes from repeated execution under pressure. Isolation gave you pressure without relief. If you did not break, you hardened. Now here is something nobody says out loud. Once you become effective, people will rewrite your story. They will say you were always talented. They will say you were lucky. They will say it worked out. They will not mention the silence, the ignored messages, the failed attempts, the nights nobody called. And that is fine, because you did not build for applause. You built for independence. Independence is the real victory, not fame, not attention, not revenge. Independence, the ability to move without permission, the ability to survive without endorsement, the ability to expand without attachment. That is power, not loud power, not emotional power, structural power. You are no longer waiting, you are no longer explaining. You are no longer scanning the room for belief. You measure output, you increase value, you sharpen execution. Nobody is coming. Good. That means there is no interference. If this process felt uncomfortable, that is intentional. Comfort does not create leverage. Silence did. Pressure did. Isolation did. Now the only question left is simple. Will you continue operating this way, even when support appears? Because true independence is not proven in loneliness. It is proven in consistency. So stop talking, stop announcing, stop hoping someone notices. Build something undeniable. Make yourself so competent, so precise, so reliable that support becomes optional. And when support becomes optional, it becomes a bonus, not a requirement. That is the final transformation, from unsupported to unshakable.